Good afternoon, gents.
Hello, hello.
And good afternoon to everyone else. Welcome to CG Lab's third live webinar. Today we've got Tobie Alberts, who's going to talk all things IoT. I'm Dave Cummins. A quick reminder, you can find this every Wednesday at 12:30 live. We're posting on YouTube and Facebook. Hopefully shortly we'll be adding that to LinkedIn. You can like the post media, but you can also set a reminder so that you can see when it comes on each week. Please do so. And again, any feedback from the podcast, the webinars, is more than welcome. Each week, we're going to be trying to bring you something new, innovative research development, something that we're either dealing with ourselves as a company or stuff that we've been looking at. And again, this week, I think, is going to be a really interesting week, and I've been looking forward to it. We're always keen to get feedback. And also your questions. So if you're viewing this from any of our socials, please start putting your questions up as soon as you've got them. And at the end of Tobie's presentation, we'll start firing them at Tobie. So quickly to introduce the team, Mike first.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Mike, as many of you hopefully will know by now. Services and Middle East Manager for CG Labs, so concentrated more on the UAV side. But the IoT, it's growing in such a fashion and expanding that I dare say it's going to feature more across different platforms, not so much in fixed structures, but it's certainly moving into the mobile side of things, both ground-based and UAV-based. So yeah, certainly an interesting topic. Looking forward to Tobie's presentation.
Great. And Tobie, before you start the presentation, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Great stuff. Hi, guys. Tobie Alberts here from IoT.nxt. I'm here in Europe. I'm the lead technical side for Europe, as well as the tech evangelist. I've got a lot of experience in IoTs. Been a hobbyist myself, all the way through to large enterprise rollouts. And I'm here to talk to you about what IoTs are and sort of just expand on how do we get that art of the possible down to an actual product, or get it deployed in your organization, or just trying to understand it a little bit better.
Brilliant. Tobie, what I'll do, if you're happy, I will bring up your presentation.
Sure.
You have the floor.
Yeah, we have the website. I thought maybe just introducing what IoTs are. So, I mean, what is IoTs? If you look at the pronunciation, or abbreviation, IoT stands for Internet of Things. For short, it's about extending the power of the internet beyond computers and smartphones to a whole range of other things. Processes, environments, and those connected things are used to gather information and then send information back, or both. So, bidirectionality. But why does IoT matter? And IoT provides businesses and people a better insight into and control over about 99% of objects and environments that remain beyond the reach of the internet. And by doing so, IoT allows businesses and people to be more connected to the world around them, and to do more meaningful and higher level work and getting insight. If you look at what generation we're at, currently we're at generation that data is not enough anymore. We want information. We want more. So to try and explain what IoTs are, I'm going to jump into something which is a real life environment that we're currently seeing in the world. So how do we help, or how do we solve a lot of the issues that we have around, for example, COVID-19? So what IoT.nxt did is using IoTs, we're trying to solve this problem, but also giving back to communities and to the world a better and easier understanding around COVID-19 and how to help people. So I'm going to skip some of the marketing slides and really jump into what I believe is the true power of IoTs. So the current world that we live in, and you'll see it in your own areas. When you go to the supermarket, we now have queues. People are standing outside. You're only allowed a certain number of people inside a store, and really somebody standing at probably at the gate, probably standing in front of the store, and sort of counting people as they go past, and allowing them out. And then later on, it's something that's coming is basically monitoring the amount of traffic that goes in and out of big cities, big areas, and understanding how we can get these things that were not connected before, connected now, and getting information out of it. So the real power of IoTs is not just connecting things, but it really is trying to make it as easy as possible. So what can we leverage in your environment to get information and to use that information? So if you look at, for example, what we did with our CoVision product, we're using things like smartphones. So allowing people to do people counting using a normal smartphone mounted at the door, and then giving them the information in a meaningful way to understand how many people do we have in the store without needing to put somebody's life, for example, in jeopardy, and putting them in the front and exposing them to all of the people coming in and out. Or you can use things that some of you might be more familiar with, things like Pi units or desktop machines, etc. And one of the powers of IoT is not just taking new things and connecting them, but the existing things, like, for example, you have here is having CCTV cameras. So a lot of us and companies and enterprises, we invest quite an amount of money in CCTV. So how do we leverage CCTV, get it connected into IoT, and then giving me more information from that existing asset? So what we, for example, did here with the queue management is using the CCTV in banks, and then we can calculate the queue size. Why is that relevant? The relevance here is taking all of this disparate systems and information and then visualizing it away, not just for shop owners, but also to the public. So for a good example that we did here is create a public-facing website. So a store can onboard, for example, one of their stores, and then give the public information on when their store is full or busy, at what times they are full or busy, and what times they are not. So this allows the public to go and plan their shopping session or grocery session in a more meaningful way. And for example, here you'll see just taking or leveraging existing phone, putting machine learning on it, computer vision on it, to get all of that information through to our environment. So, I mean, now looking at a post-pandemic world. So this is something very similar in most industries, is you have a building. So how does IoT tie up into a building? If you have a smarter building or a more efficient building, will that save energy? Will that give you a better energy footprint? Might that give you the ability to schedule areas more effectively? Will that just give you the ability to view things like utilities? I mean, I don't know how many of you actually go and look at your utility bill and really try and understand why I'm spending X amount of kilowatt hours, X amount of water. It's not like a cell phone a bill that you might get at the end of the month with the itemized billing. So this is the amount that you used on calling grandma. This is the amount you used on calling your girlfriend. Where with energy, you just get this one bill and that's it. So IoTs allows us to unlock that again, seeing why exactly, or giving you that itemized billing, for example, into understanding your utilities. And this can be any process or any object or any asset that you have that you need more information from. And this is where IoTs really unlock it. If you look at a building, for example, it might not be a very smart building. You might want to add things like sensors. So sensors allows us to, again, accumulate more data from things that doesn't necessarily allow us to get that information from them. So adding things like temperature sensors or air quality sensors to your building gives you a better understanding of what's going on in that building. So this is sort of a list of the art of the possible, but let's maybe go jump into what an actual building looks like. So if you, for example, just look at IoT systems and how they work. So this is if you're more technical, understanding that if here at the bottom is connecting your BMS systems, connecting generators, connecting your things. And then how do you get those things to a place where not just being a hobbyist, connecting your water pump to your phone, and I mean, that's it, is really understanding what is all of these assets, all of these disparate systems doing and how they interlinked with each other. So a good example would be using CCTV to allow people into a building or not, or to understand the occupancy in the building. And this might even be used in a place where if they find a person that shouldn't be there, to lock doors. So the interconnected parts of all of these high value assets that you have, how do they connect to each other and not just give you information? So if you look at what we did at some of these buildings, and I'm going to sort of jump into what we call digital twins. So you have IoTs, and this will probably be another webinar around digital twinning. But if you look at IoTs, getting information from connected devices and assets and processes, you need to, at the end of the day, either visualize it in a way, see the information in a way, manage a process in a way, or even change what a, say, workflow does. So here, for example, or here on the screen, you'll see a digital twin that we did for a building, and I think this is the Vodafone Paddington offices building on their 3rd floor. How we took all these things and created a story. So from managing their power to understanding what their green footprint is, to understanding what consumption. I mean, if you're a boss and you have employees and you're paying buildings, understanding the amount of kilowatt hour per employee really gives you the ability to either grow the business bigger, grow it smaller, understanding the overhead that comes with just adding 500 employees to a building. And of course, you have your itemized billing. So if you look at your energy usage in a mini view, itemized. So these are the things using most of the energies. You can now use this insight to either switch them off or replace them or just use them better. And if you look like things like assets, you might understand a dishwasher. How many times does it get used in a day, or a fridge, or whatever asset it is? And then understanding why, if it breaks every 500th of a use, you can start doing things like predictive maintenance and machine learning around it to understand that linear growth or linear change in it. So if you look, for example, this is also a digital twin, is taking these sensors and information and creating things like heat maps. So now I know part of my building being used is what part of the building is being used the most, and now, especially with COVID-19, what area should be disinfected more often than others. Good. I think I'm going to stop there if there's any questions on the floor.
No, that's brilliant. And actually, it's funny, you talk about tracking kilowatt hours to staff. I was thinking kids. And then I could work out which one of my children has to leave home first based on the amount of power they consume in the house for their iPhones. I'm gonna take this one back. No, thanks very much. And I guess before we open up to the questions, I really like it. The first one will always come, and again, we've worked with you guys for a while now, and the bit that was amazing to me is when you look at a CCTV retrofit or an air conditioning retrofit to try and get digital. We're talking multi-million pounds for a building, never mind, a large industrial building. So, and I know a typical engineer brain, you'll say it depends, but what sort of prices are we talking for, doing a room, doing a house, by comparison to ripping out and retrofitting digital?
Well, I mean, and this is funny, we did a project recently where it was a very old building. I think it was also in London. So very old building. The BMS system wasn't a smart system, so it wasn't one of those brand new BMS or BIS systems that gives you connectivity already. And what they needed to do is get information from the building, but also not rip and replace everything. But they didn't have a choice. So they actually got a quote to get it rip and replace. So the entire building from scratch, brand new. We were talking around 500,000 to replace the entire building with brand new BMS, HVACing, name it. But with things like IoTs, just connecting the existing assets or the legacy assets, adding something small that's smart, that'll just read an analog, read a digital from these units, we brought that down all the way to 150,000. So there's a big difference in it. And yes, like I said, it depends if the scenario allows or not. But I mean, we've seen funny things. Coming from a Southern African point of view, we had mining processing plants coming from the 1972s that we had to do with magnetrons. So yeah, all depends, but most of these legacy assets will give you the ability to connect to it. I see we have a...
So this first question in, and I think I stole it. I stole it from Wayne. So I mean, he's saying direct return on investment for installation costs and running costs of a system like this, and what's the actual saving? And I guess it depends, but you sort of...
Of course, I mean, and there's so many ways to show data and visualize it for every business. Every single business is different, and every single business might have their key points that is either big expenditures or not. So it's really taking an existing thing like a BMS integration and then adding onto it things that's more specific to your client or to a problem. I see we have another question, Mark Bates.
It's actually not a question, it looks like a statement, but this is extremely powerful for property and tenant managers that have to oversee multiple properties and locations. So I guess let's turn that into a question then, Tobie. Are you seeing it taken up in that industry?
And I mean, if you look at where IoT started, I mean, even as IoT.nxt, we started in prisons. And I mean, what is a prison? It's just a smart building with people that you're not allowed to get out. So
where you need to control access.
Exactly. So it's controlling access, it's controlling environments, etc. And if you really sort of, I don't want to say dumb it down, but if you take the golden thread through each of these projects, it's all just either a building or an asset, and you need to get either information directly from it, or you need to go and sensorize it in a way. And that's IoTs. Either I connect to something, or I give it something to make it smarter.
Absolutely.
I think from the current perspective, COVID-19 has killed the discussion and the debate on the environment and waste and energy usage and whatnot. But I dare say that when we come out of this at the other end, the whole COVID-19 environmental issue will probably roll into one. And I think there'll be I'd like to think there'll be a step change in the way people look at energy usage, consumption, waste, and all of these kind of things. And I think this is vitally important. I think being able to have real-time information on energy usage and consumption is an important tool. And I think there's going to be tremendous growth in this.
Absolutely.
So the next one's coming from Runa. We're expanding in the public sector, mainly municipalities. Could you highlight some assets to include in an IoT system for such, Tobie? Buildings, vehicles, energy assumption runs to his mind. Second, how does your system work along or on top of a wide-ranging existing monitoring systems? And before you answer it, I think you've given me one example in the past where you monitor the movement of people and the density of people depending on how you're heating the room. Maybe give that example, because I think that's a really good example of how it could work.
So that's smart control. So getting to the question, if you look at some of these systems, yes, it's BMS, but if you connect things, for example, and this is where, I mean, as IoT experts, we created a thing called a Raptor. So a Raptor is our universal plug. So this allows us to connect all these things and make it possible for you as a company or for us as a solution provider to connect disparate systems together. And that's on top of things like municipality, buildings, existing systems. Good example, again, would be the Paddington office. They already had things like IR sensors in the roof. They already had desk occupancy sensors on the desks. So again, without ripping and replacing, connecting to assets that's already there. These are already IoT assets. They're already brand new. They're already smart. But again, how do they connect to each other? And that's what we. Well, I mean, that's the biggest thing that we do, is connecting these things together to give you, the information that you need. But contextual control, like you just explained, it's not just about getting information. You have to have contextual control. So a good example is, if a room is occupied, like we have our sensors in the roof, we can see it's occupied with 50 people. The CO2 levels are going up. What happens in a normal environment? The normal environment, people are, will just get sleepy, get warm or get cold and complain about it and leave. Where in a smart environment, measuring CO2 and the people already, I know that when CO2 levels go up, my damper position should open up to give more airflow. People won't go tired. I can see that certain areas inside of my rooms have a certain temperature. I don't need to go and change the temperature for every single person. I can give them the opportunity to go book a desk in an area that is 2 degrees more or 2 degrees less, which they would prefer. Just giving you that information or giving that information to your tenants allows them to make a lot of these decisions by themselves without just complaining or passing out.
Yeah. So just looking at buildings then, I mean, I think Wayne sort of asked the return on investment. What's the standard energy saving? If you were to plug in IoT into your standard industrial or commercial building, what are you saving?
So it all depends again, but looking at things like HVAC, most of these assets are not controlled in the right way. So what we see is a lot of these projects, especially on larger scales or larger buildings, is we see anything between 15 and 30% savings on the energy bill. And this again it's sort of how you managing how smartly you managing your HVAC system. We see some of these older buildings or even schools, for example, when we plug our system there, is that they have one schedule that your facilities manager came, they put that one schedule on, and that's it. This is the winter schedule, this is the summer schedule, and that's what you run with. And these schedules run into perpetuity. So over weekends, at night, I've dealt with a lot of SIs that we have, and one of the SIs does, for example, one of your big clothing stores, starts with a P. And their buildings are constantly blowing hot air or cool air, even at night. So it really depends on how you manage your building to see what the savings would be. But just using some contextual control, again, seeing if a building is occupied, yes it is, it's not occupied, then switch off that HVAC system. Why is it running over weekends? Giving the ability to something like a facilities manager with 150 buildings, the control to go and change those buildings on a whim. Go into the system, change the building, and apply it to all these buildings without needing to go and drive out to every single building and manually change it. Or just leaving it so that it's not the issue, it's the energy manager's issue.
Yeah. So what's the and the obvious one is buildings, isn't it? That's when everyone talks IoT, immediately my head jumps to my Hive or equivalent in a building. But what's the most unusual IoT application you've heard of? I mean, we've been talking internally about putting them on pieces of equipment and then renting out per hour as opposed to per day, and the customer gets a better value. But I mean, give us some unusual ones that we wouldn't have even heard of.
Unusual ones, I think in the building space, something you won't necessarily see every day, but you sort of are impacted. I think everybody's impacted by this. If you go to a building or a restaurant, I don't know if you've went to the loo at a restaurant, but if you close that door, there's a signing sheet on there. So X, Y, and Z cleaned this at 9:15, and you sort of take their word for it. But what happens to that sheet? Nobody knows. So something cool that we've done in, I think that's in South Africa at I think it was Bitvest. They're a servicing company, so you pay to have somebody clean your offices per hour. So what we did for them is actually put sensors in the loo, so in the bathrooms. We put sensors on every single door, every single knob, so that when people go and clean that, they know this one's been used 155 times today, or when it gets used at 30 times, send somebody to go clean it. So now you have sort of cleaning like a server, cleaning as a service, where I can monitor this is the amount of actual hours we needed to go clean something, and then bill versus that, rather than say, I'm going to put 10 people at your building, and if they're busy, they're busy. If they're not, they're not. If it's clean, it's clean. If it's not, it's not. So I think that was probably one of the most wonderful but weird ones.
I'd like to see how many times the toilet was activated, but the taps weren't. That would be an interesting...
And funny enough, that was one of the use cases we did at a mutton farm. So big use case, if you're not washing your hands and using the soap for a certain amount of time, then we don't even allow you to open up the door.
You're locked in.
So you're locked in, and this was, it's a mutton processing farm, and it's, a place where you have meat and that kind of thing the whole day. So that was one of the biggest security, health risks that they had. So we went and did it. So if you don't use the soap and the water for at least 30 seconds, then the door won't open. And at the end of the day, they'll also use that as evidence bag. So when the health and safety department rocks up, they give them the little video footage of everybody washing their hands and the amount of doors being open and closed and not. Then the evidence bag is done and there's no audit for 3 or 4 weeks.
I'm definitely getting into my house. That's another one that'd be great for my kids. Before we wrap up, Mike, have you got any more questions?
No, I think we've covered most of them off.
I guess just for anyone who's tuning in, not necessarily live and had a chance to ask questions, for anyone afterwards, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with IoT.nxt is go to our website, IoT.nxt.com. And there's different regions. I mean, we have the Americas, we have Europe, we have Africa, and a lot more coming soon. So go and have a look.
Good. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for talking us through IoT. Again, it's another one of these black magics, isn't it? We've had the last couple of episodes. It's a buzzword, and I use it all the time, but I don't necessarily always know what it means. So it's nice to have you on to give us some context.
It's good just to throw around. Yeah, IoT.
Yeah. And then for those who, again, just a reminder, please like and share. You can set a reminder on the social media that you're watching this on. Next week, we'll be talking to the Horizon team regarding some equipment for mapping and monitoring drones. Really, how do we get drones back into integrated airspace? It's been a debate since I've been flying drones since 2006. It will continue to be a debate. Those guys think they've got something that's going to help, certainly in the UK and beyond. So we thought we'd have them on and have a bit of a discussion. So I'm looking forward to that. Tobie, thanks very much. Mike, again, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Tobie.
Ciao, guys.